components. There's a lot you can do here. So I'm just going to go to After Effects and make a new project. I'm not going to save what I did there. So I'm just starting with a blank slate right here. And I'm going to just continue working off of this project directory that I created for last class. If you don't already have one, just if you don't already have a directory from last class, you can just go ahead and make a new one where you right click, go to new folder, and then just make a few small folders within it right here. You're probably not going to need all these for this project, but I think this is just a good habit to get into with After Effects. And so just make a root directory project and make a folder for AEP, which is the abbreviation for After Effects projects right there. You can see the file type when you save your After Effects projects is AEP right there. And then I like to make, the main folder you're going to need is a footage or an images folder. If you decide to import images or Photoshop files that you end up using, but there's also audio and footage right there. So that's kind of my starting point. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using something called shape layers. And shape layers and solid layers are things that are generated within After Effects. And those are layer types that you actually don't need to import into that directory, which is nice. So just a reminder here, we have our After Effects interface. This is the project tab where we import and kind of organize our project. Our compositions will show here, timeline here. And then our smaller panels will show up over here. And remember, if you're not seeing a panel and you want to be able to see it right here, like a panel that I might mention later in the class, you can always go up to Window. And all the panels that you could possibly bring up are here. So let's just say I really want to bring in like my Align window right here. Is you just click it and it'll show up over here in this tab. And to minimize or maximize on it, you just, click on the name of it and it'll expand out. And remember one last thing here, just on the basics, is unlike Premiere, where your play button, stop button, all that stuff shows up somewhere around here, in After Effects that shows up under your preview tab right here. So getting this thing started, I'm going to make some new folders in my project directory because that's empty right now. And so I'm going to make my first one, I'm going to name that comps for compositions right there. And again, you just click inside of the directory and then you press this folder button right here to make a new folder. Remember, if you ever want to rename it, you can just click on it once and then press return on your keyboard. And that's the shortcut for kind of renaming your project folders right there. But I like to just mirror what I did in my, manually kind of mirror what I did in my project directory on my Finder most of the time, except for the only difference being that I add a new comps folder in there. So comps. I'll make one called images, one called footage. And if you make a folder within a folder like this, let's just say I'm trying to make my audio folder and it comes in like that, where it's inside of my footage folder, all you need to do is just click on it and then just drag it into this area where you get a little plus icon on your cursor, and then it'll kind of go back out into the main directory right there. So to kind of get things started, hopefully things will look like that. And again, this is more about just kind of setting good practices, habits moving forward, because this is going to be like a relatively simple project, more or less. But you'll find as you work more and more in After Effects, your projects will get more and more complicated. And if you don't get in the habit of creating these directories, it'll turn into a mess. And I've seen projects get corrupted like crazy by just kind of things being a little hodgepodge. So it just helps to kind of get in this habit here. So to start things off, I'm going to make a new composition. So I'm just going to click once on this composition folder. And there's a few ways you can make a new composition in After Effects. The way I prefer to do it in After Effects is I just go up to the top up here and go to composition and then new composition right there. You can press Command and N for this. And this creates a new composition. And we went over this on Thursday's class. So just moving top to bottom, we can name it right here. And I'll just call this main Pendulum 1 right there. And So you name your composition right here. And remember, a composition in After Effects is pretty much the same thing as a sequence in Premiere. And so we have our presets right here. And what I recommend you do is use the HDTV 1080 24 preset, and that'll get you set up pretty much exactly what you want. If you'd rather work in basically 30 frames per second, you can go down to the one right here that's the same name, but with 29.97 at the end. I generally prefer for animations to do 24 though. And if you click on that preset right there, so HDTV 1080 24, you can see the width is 1920 1080. That's all good for HD settings. I don't really need to change anything in all of this. The only thing you might want to change is the duration. So right here, this is 5 seconds right here. So these going right to left, these first two zeros are the frames. These two numbers right here are the number of seconds. And then here we're in the minutes. And then finally, all the way at the left, we have hours. So you want this to be pretty short. So I recommend either doing 10 seconds or 5 seconds for the duration right there. And then when you have it, you just press OK. Yes. Okay. Yeah, let me, so just kind of create that composition. And it'll either look like this or like this when you create it. Okay, so press the screen button just to bring it to full screen. Or sorry, okay, that looks weird. So go to Window, Workspace, go to, oh, so default must have gotten messed up or something. Oh wait, there we go. Yeah, so whenever that happens in the future, if the windows look weird, yeah, that's all right. Are you doing all right over there?
Yeah. No, it's just it's nothing.
Okay. Gotcha. Just let me know. Okay, so and for this, I like to start with just a plain black composition, because if I want a color to go in the background, I'll set that in the next step right here. One button that I didn't show you last time, and I'm just kind of strategically kind of revealing more and more kind of buttons and things to you here as we go along here, is this button right here shows you the transparency grid right here. So in After Effects, when you create a new composition like we just did, so I'll just go to composition settings right here, you can set your background color right there. And so you can change your color to anything right here. And as long as you render, when you go to render your finished animation, as long as you don't render with something called an alpha channel, this will show up. But if you render with an alpha channel, it'll show up as transparent, meaning that it'll be almost like you did a cell animation, where whatever is in that red background area will actually be transparent in your scene right here. So that's something I'll kind of elaborate on further down the road here. But for now, I'm just going to set this to be black. And so first thing I want to do is I'll create my background color for this animation right here. And so in the last demonstration, I showed you how you can import your own images and things like that and bring them into your scene right here. And for this demonstration, I'm going to be working entirely just within After Effects. And so with a new layer, last time I imported an image, and that was my layer right here. There's a few other kinds of layers you can create in After Effects right here. And you can see if you go up to the top where it says layer, it might show up as gray like that. And if it shows up as gray like that, it means that the project tab is open. So just make sure, or highlighted, and you can see it's highlighted because it's got a blue box around it. So just click on the composition, or sorry, the timeline down here. And you go to layer, new. And so we have a few options right here. So layer, new. So we can add text. So when you're animating text, that's how you kind of create new text and put it into your scene. We have a solid, which is what we're about to create in just a moment here. You can see we can create a light and a camera. So that gets into 3D stuff right there. And we have a few other options, and I'm going to go over a lot of these here today. So to start things off, I'm going to go to layer, new, and solid. So layer, new, and then solid. And you'll get this window right here. And you want this to make sure that this is comp size. So you might need to just click this button, but by default, it should just be the same size as your composition right here. And you can choose a color in here. So remember, when choosing a color, this is a lot like the default in Photoshop, where if you bring your this little dot up here towards the top left, you'll get white. Along the left, this is gray tones going from gray. And if you want total 50% gray, you can just type in 50% right here to get a total neutral gray right there. Or you can drag it all the way down to black. Then we obviously have, we have fully saturated blue, and then that gets darker and darker blue as you drag that down, and then you have anywhere in between where you can dial in your colors. And then finally, you have this kind of rainbow slider where you can choose your whatever hue you want to be working with right here. So here I'm just going to set a blue. And for me, I'm going to set a blue, and I'm going to go, so it's not fully saturated and it's not too bright, kind of somewhere maybe around here. Sometimes the fully saturated colors, those can be great, but sometimes they can be a little bit much for the viewer to look at. So I'll press OK. And then when I press OK here, it'll fill up my whole sequence with that color right here. And now I have like a physical layer that is that background color right there. And something that's nice here is if you wanted to, you can animate this. So this is called a solid right here. And by default, it fills up your whole screen right there. You can, when I created the solid, if you look over here, it automatically generated a new folder right here called solids right here. And so as we create new layers, a lot of them will show up in our project under this new solids folder right there that just got generated by After Effects. Remember, if it comes in with a name, for me, it comes in medium, royal blue, solid, parentheses 1. And if you want to change the name of it, and I always recommend just kind of naming things as you move along, is so just you highlight it like this just by clicking on it once, and then you press return, and that lets you rename it. And I'll just call this blue background 1 right there. And the reason for that is this window right here, your timeline is going to fill up with a bunch of stuff as you work. And as long as you just take that 1 second just to click on the layer, press return, and name it, it's going to make it a lot easier for yourself when you open it the next day and you're trying to figure out what you were doing, last time. And so with this background layer, something that's nice here too is, let's say that once after we've animated for a while and I want to change this color, I can just go over to, so I'll just select this background layer right here and then go to layer and then solid settings right there. So you have to click on the solid like this, and this won't work unless you click on it like that. And then you go to layer and then solid settings. And you can change the color at any point right here as you're working right here. So this is kind of a living layer that you can continue to adjust right here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to, we've created it, and I'm just going to hide it for a minute, which is, if we look over at the left, we have the little eye button right here. And this is how you just hide or reveal a layer right there, is with that eye button right there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what do you want to call it? The wire for the pendulum, or the stick, or whatever the best word is for it. So I'm going to create a different kind of layer for that. So the solid is really good. This is going to be called a shape layer, and it's really similar to a solid layer in a lot of ways. But in terms of for animation, I tend to like shape layers a little bit better. So I'm just going to hide that, and then I'm going to go up to layer, new, and then go down to shape layer right there. So layer, new, and then shape layer. And when I click on it, nothing happens other than we just generate just a blank empty layer that says shape layer on it. So right now, shape layer is just an empty canvas for us to kind of create something on. And there's kind of 2 methods we can use to create a shape layer right here. So I can use either, if you look up here, as long as the shape layer is selected, and notice that this toolbar might change a little bit up here depending on what layer is selected. So right now the solid is selected and some elements disappear. And then when I click on shape layer, some of these elements reappear. That's because these controls right here are distinct to a shape layer right here. So a shape layer is, if you remember my pendulum animation, this is how I constructed the pendulum, was through shape layers. And there's two ways to do it. I can use one of these two controls to manually draw on a shape, or I can use some of these controls over here, particularly this arrow, to create shapes right here. So before we even get into the kind of actual pendulum animation, let me just show you what happens here. So let's say I want to create a rectangle or a rounded rectangle right here. So let's do a rounded rectangle. And so I just click and I hold to get this expanded menu with options right here. And again, in After Effects, you can tell if the expanded menu is available, because there will be a little white arrow in the bottom right corner of a tool if there's more options that are available right there. So if I wanted to make a rounded rectangle, I'll just click on that. And now in the composition view, if I click and drag, I have a square right here. And oops, see, I slipped and pressed a button there by mistake. And if we zoom in on a little bit, you can see that it's rounded along the edges there. And notice that the fill color is this color right here. And then the stroke, which is this the outline that surrounds the layer right there. And that's always going to be called a stroke, is right here. And then this is the size of the stroke right here. So you can set the size of the stroke to be either non-existent right there at 0, or you can expand it out to be large. And again, I did this just by clicking on this option right here. So let me just edit undo to get back. And so I can either draw one of these on, so I could hypothetically draw on a star right there. And it appears all white because the stroke's really big on it right now. So I just drag the stroke down just by dragging from right to left right there. So that's one way to create a shape layer. Let me just press edit undo. So it's now empty again because I pressed edit undo a bunch of times. So next up, we have, and I kind of put this in the same category right here, is between these tools right here. So it should show up as a square at first, but if you click on it, there's some other options below it. And those are kind of like some nice presets that you can begin with. We have the pen tool here as well. And so the pen tool, and this is, if anyone who's used Illustrator, this should be pretty familiar to the pen tool there, is you click and you drag, and you can create these anchor points and beziers. And if I hold spacebar while I'm clicking and dragging, I can kind of change the position of it. But you just draw it on until you close it off. So, and you can see right here, you can close off the shape. Your pen tool will have a little 0 show up next to it right there on the bottom right of your cursor. And when you click there, that means you're going to close it off. And then I'm clicking and I'm dragging, and I can continue to adjust the bezier. And something that's nice with the pen tool, and we're not really going to use the pen tool for this assignment necessarily. I mean, you can, but I'm not going to use it for this demonstration. I just want to introduce this idea to you. Is if I go back once it's drawn in all the way and closed off, if I press V or go back to the selection tool, I can click either on the anchor points and change the shape of it this way, or I can click on these Bezier handles right here. And you can see as I'm clicking it, it's kind of the shape corresponds with how I manipulate the handle right there. So this pen tool right here is a way you can make custom shapes right there. And then finally, let me just delete that, is another way with the shape layer that you can kind of generate your first shape is if we go, you remember the solid layer, when I click on it, this area up here is empty. And then when I click on the shape layer, there's some options right here. There's this little add, it says add right here, and there's a little triangle next to it. And if you click on that, you can kind of add in your own elements this way through a menu right here. And so this will add in, like, very similar to this button right here, where we can add in a rectangle or a circle, which here is going to be called an ellipse. Is I can just click on this triangle, and I can go down to, let's just say, ellipse right here, and it creates an ellipse. But right here, it's the path of an ellipse, but it's not filled in with anything right now, which can be a little confusing because you would think it would be filled in right there. So we can see we generated an ellipse, which is showing up right there under the shape layer, is this little submenu right here. And here I can change the size of it, or sorry, the position of it and the size of it right here. And something that's nice about generating a shape this way is it generates it right in the center of your canvas right here, which can be pretty convenient. Although I'll show you a technique where you can center anything no matter what here. So this has an empty path, and we can just change the size of it right here. And if we want to fill it in with this color right here, what you need to do is you need to click on this arrow again, where we went to fill, and then where we went to ellipse, and then I'll go down to fill right here. And when I click on that, it's going to fill. It might take 1 second. There we go. And then it'll fill your ellipse with a color right there. So, and if I want to change that color, I think I can just change it right here. Yeah, so I can just click on this little button up here and change the color that's inside of the ellipse right there. So whether you create your shapes over here on this side of things, or if you create your shapes on this side of things, it's really kind of the same, and it's just two ways of doing the same thing here. Take note here how I created an ellipse right here, and you can see that we have this little sub tab right here that says Ellipse Path right here, and that ellipse path is this blue outline that's creating the shape right here. And if you click it down, we can change the size and position of it right here with that slider right there. And additionally, we can animate the size and position of it right there. So if I animated the size down, so you can see that's one way you can animate the size of an object right there is through these components here. But then there's also this fill tab right here where I have the color and opacity, and some of these other elements can be animated as well. And when you click on this tab, there's other options down here as well. So there's other kind of items that we can kind of explore here with shape layers. So right here, example I did, like I went down to it's called, what is this one called? Pucker and bloat right here. And so you can see I can animate like this kind of happening right here. So there's kind of some fun stuff you can explore with the stuff within this tab, particularly for motion graphics right there. So that's kind of an introduction to what a shape layer is. And so I'm just going to delete it because I was just kind of doing all that to show you how to create it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create the wire for the swinging pendulum. So I'm just going to go to layer, new, and then go down to shape layer right here. And it's going to generate a empty blank shape layer right there. And I want this to be a rectangle, but I'd like it to be rounded instead of having like hard edges on each side. And so in order to create a rounded rectangle, there's actually not an option over on this side of things. And so to create that rounded rectangle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go over to this side, the first side that I was showing. I'll click on the rectangular tool and go down to the rounded rectangular tool option right here. So the second one down right there. So again, it's this button right here. Go down to rectangular tool right there. And then I'm just going to manually draw in what I want to be my wire for my pendulum right here. So I'm just going to click and drag and draw it on right there. And I'll just go ahead and name it. So I'll just, on the shape layer right here, I'm just going to highlight it or just click on it once, press return, and I'll name it wire right there. And something I can do here is you create your shape right here, but we can continue to manipulate this. Nothing's set in stone when you're working this way. So for instance, if I want this, I drew it on pretty small. If I press the V button or go over to the selection tool over here, I can click on any of these blue squares that are outlining it right here. And I can make it, I can extend it to be longer. I can extend it, I can physically move it right here. You can see it might change shape as you drag it like this. And we'll kind of worry about that in a moment here. Remember, I can zoom in and out by using my trackpad and holding H on my keyboard for the hand tool, or pressing this button for the hand tool right there to kind of move your position around. I'm pressing V, and so I can kind of rescale it and kind of move it around right here. Oops, let me just get it back to its initial position. If I want to go back to my main screen right here, remember this tab right here, and then I go up to fit, and then that'll fit us back to screen right here. And so I'm just going to extend this to be longer again, and a little bit wider right there. And for this, it has a stroke on it, and actually I don't really want a stroke on this. I'd just rather this be a solid color here. So I'm just going to turn on my background layer just so I can compare these again. And I'm going to click on the shape layer. And I'm first going to turn off the stroke here. And so one way to do that is that right here where it says the word stroke is I could either just drag this down to 0 and that'll get rid of the stroke. But another thing I can do is I can just click on the word stroke. And when I click on the word stroke, this little submenu comes up. And this is true for Photoshop, Illustrator, or After Effects here, is if you click on this little white line box with the red arrow through it, that just means no stroke right there. So if you ever click that button, that just means you're removing the stroke from an object. So again, if you want to get rid of the stroke, I just click on the word stroke right there, go down here to this little button right here with the white box and the red arrow, and press OK. And now I have a solid object. And if I want to change the color of it, I just click within the box where it says fill right here. And we get this menu again. And I can just kind of move this around until this gets to a color that I like right here. And then I'll just press OK once I have it. So let me just rename it right here. So I just clicked on it, press return. So you can see right here, hopefully, so everyone try to get to this point if you haven't already. And so right here, if I press R on my keyboard, which is a shortcut for rotating it, I can also just click on this little tab over here and you can see the transform options. This is the anchor point for this solid layer that we just made right there. So if I were to, bless you, go to rotate, it's going to rotate from that anchor point right there. You see that? So I'm rotating. But when I animate my pendulum, that's not where I want my anchor point to be right there. So first thing I want to do is there's kind of two controls that I want to introduce here, which are super, super helpful in After Effects. So the first one is I just want my pendulum to be in the center of our composition right here. And I can actually tell where the center of my composition is because on the solid object, its anchor point is going to be right square in the middle of your entire composition right there. So you can almost use that as a marker. But there's this really helpful window in here that's called Align right here in After Effects. And if you don't see the Align window, you just go to Windows and then go to Align right there to get that panel to show up. And Illustrator has this as well. So I'll click on my shape layer. And then, so we have these different options I can either align it to be on the left side of the screen, or this button to the right, sorry, did I say to the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen. Or if you press this button right here, it'll align it right to the center of your scene right there. So that'll just kind of jump your, whatchamacallit, your shape into the center of the screen in terms of left and right. And then top to bottom, I can align it to the top, align it to the bottom, or I can align it to the center right there. So to get your object completely centered in the frame without having to really do much work at all is you just press this button right. So you go to the Align window, which again, you can find at Windows, Align right there. And it should pop up somewhere around here. And you just press this button right here to center it, and left to right. And then, where is it? This button right here to center it top to bottom right there. But you can see that so I've moved my physical object into the right place right here. So that's step one done. But now I still need to move that anchor point. And so you can see when I go to rotate this, it's still rotating around that anchor point, which is not what we want for the pendulum. And so this is where that Y shortcut that I mentioned at the beginning of class comes in. And the Y shortcut is the shortcut for this button right here. And the button is called Pan Behind Anchor Point Tool. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to move this anchor point wherever we want it to go without actually physically moving our object right here. So like for instance, if I were to move my anchor point down here, it actually moves my actual object, which I don't want. But if I press Y or press this button right here, my cursor changes. And so it's a little normal cursor, but at the bottom right of it, there's a little anchor point icon on the bottom right of my cursor. And it allows me to click on my anchor point and physically move it wherever I want it to go in my scene. So I could physically move my anchor point right there, for instance. And now when I go to rotate, it's going to rotate from that point now. So Y is the shortcut for that. And then an additional shortcut is, so I pressed Y once and it kind of enters the tool into this tool mode. but if I hold down Command on my keyboard, it snaps it to, so Command on your keyboard snaps it to either the left of my shape, to the middle of my shape, or to the left of my shape. So left, middle, right, right there. And I can also snap it to the top or the bottom. And I'm just holding down Control this whole time right here. And so you can snap it to any corner of your object right here. And so I'm holding down Control and I'm moving it towards the top, and I'm not bringing it all the way to the top where it snaps there, because I actually want it to rotate from maybe like this point right here. So I have my anchor point right there. And so now when I go to rotate my object, so I just click on this tab, go down to transform, and then click on rotate right here. It's now rotating from that point right there. So just to kind of show this again from the beginning is, when you create your shape, it might look something like that. So step one is I need to move the physical shape into the center of my scene. And so to do that, you just need to find your align window. This button right here and this button right here will snap it right to the middle of your scene, but you can see that the anchor point is in the wrong place. So to move the anchor point, you just press Y once, and then your cursor will go into this anchor point mode right here, where you can physically move your anchor point around. And then if you hold Command, it'll snap it to helpful positions on your project. And I'll just move the anchor point right up to there. And once you have that, you should be in good shape. Is everyone kind of caught up on that? It looks like you all have that. Yeah. I want to lock my background layer just so I don't mess with it by mistake. So if this is the lock icon right there. If I just click this tab right here, it makes it so, you see when I try to select the background, it makes it so that it's not selectable anymore. And so that'll make it so that when you're animating, you don't have to worry about selecting your background by mistake. So that's a really important step that I forgot to mention right there. So the lock button for your background will be good. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to create the pendulum for the bottom of my animation, and then I'm going to attach it to my wire here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have my wire be its own layer, and then I'm going to have my pendulum be its own layer right here. And so the pendulum, when you're doing your project, you can either do what I'm about to do, where you use a shape layer, or you can create like a Photoshop element, and kind of make that your import that into your project and use that as your pendulum object. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an ellipse. And so what I'll do is I'll go to Layer, New, and then create a second shape layer right here. So Layer, New Shape Layer right there. And remember, when you create a shape layer, you're just going to end up with a blank, empty layer, because you have to kind of create the shape. And there's two ways to do it. I'll kind of stick with this side of the menu, but remember that you can create your ellipse with these buttons over here as well. So, I'm going to do it over here. Sorry. So right now my shape layer is empty, and where it says add right here, there's this little arrow button directly to the right of it. So I'll click right there, and then I'm just going to make an ellipse path by just clicking on the little triangle arrow next to where it says add, and go down to ellipse right there. And I'll create that, and it creates a tiny little circular path that is empty. It doesn't have any color in it. And so that's one step. And then the next step is I need to click on this arrow again. And so back where it says add, click the arrow that's right next to it, and then go down to fill. So I need to fill the shape with some kind of color right here. So this is kind of like a two-step process right here. And it'll usually give your computer 1 second. Mine's being a little slow, but it should fill at some point here. There we go. That took a while. And so it creates an ellipse right here. So something that's nice about this is it saves us the step of using the align tab, because it generates it right into the middle of our scene for us right there. So it kind of doing it this way at least saves us that step. But I now need to scale it up. And so I can scale this in one of two ways. I can either go down to the transform tab down here and see where it says scale right there. I can just scale it up this way right there. So I'm just going down, so my new shape layer right here, and I'll just call this circle, or I'll call it circle 1. And I go down to transform, and I can physically scale it just by clicking on where it says the number 100 and then dragging from left to right there. Or I can also have two ways of doing this. I can go down to contents and go to ellipse path right here. And you can see I can take the size and do the same thing where I just take the size and scale it up right there. So you can either do it, go under your shape layer right here. So we have our shape layer that I just created right there. You can either open up the ellipse path tab right there and then go down to size and scale it up there. Or I can go under the transform menu and scale it up there. And both of those do the same, essentially the same thing right here. And so I've scaled it up. I might have made it a little too large right there. And I might want to change the color right here. So if you want to change the color of your shape layer, you just remember, you just make sure that your shape layer is the one that's currently selected right here. So you can select any of these layers right here. So I have the circle shape layer right there. So I make sure that that's selected. And then I go up to where it says fill up here, click on that, and I can change my color manually up here. And you can kind of check your color wheel and see what works best. I'm going to go with a red, something like that. And so for this, I actually want, you can see the anchor point. Something else that was kind of nice about creating my shape layer through this menu right here is my anchor point is automatically right in the center of my object right here. So normally if you created your shape layer with these buttons over here, you might need to press Y and then hold Command on your keyboard to snap it right into the middle of your pendulum. You can see right here, I can snap it to any of my corners while holding Command, and you just want it to be right in the center. And then once you have that, I'll press V or press this selection tool right here, and I'll just physically move it down to the bottom of my wire right here. To make sure that this anchor point is where I actually want it on my wire, I could, you can pretty much just hold Shift and drag it down, and it'll just kind of do it. You can do it by eye right there. So again, I'm just holding down Shift. So I'm clicking and dragging, but then I hold Shift, and you see how it snaps it into that vertical axis. So if you're trying to move it up and down vertically, you can click and drag and just hold Shift once you started clicking and dragging, and it'll physically move it down. Or you can go down to transform, position, and physically move the slider right here next to position right there to move the position of it right there. And I'm just going to adjust this a little bit further. Okay. So hopefully at this point you have the pendulum wire and then the circle at the bottom of it. And notice that the anchor point for the circle is right in the center of the circle right there. And remember, if you need to center it, you just press Y and then hold down Command and move your anchor point so that it's right in the middle there. And then I have my pendulum wire where I did that same thing, where you just, if you need to change your anchor point, it's Y and then Command to move the anchor point. You want your anchor point to be right there. And if you notice here, if I press, so I have my wire selected right here in my timeline. And then if I press this button right here, which is the rotation tool, or W, and I move my wire, my pendulum is not moving with it right there. And so what we need to do is we need to attach the circle to the wire. And the way to do that is called parenting in After Effects. And parenting is super easy. It's so you can see we have these little spiral buttons right here. And when you want to parent one thing to another, you just click and hold on the spiral, and then you'll drag to the layer you want to parent it to. So I have the circle, and I want to parent that to the wire because I'm going to animate the wire, and I want the circle to follow along. So the way to parent it is you just click and hold on this little spiral. So I have my circle selected, and next to the circle, I have this little spiral button, and then I click, and I'm holding down the left click, and you can see I have this little blue line right here, and I want to parent it to the wire. So I'm just, and if it's not attached to anything and I let go, it just does like a little squiggly, like tight wire kind of letting go. But what you do is you click and then you drag it until the layer you want to parent it to gets highlighted, right? Just like that. So you can see that I'm clicking and holding on the spiral and then dragging it to the wire layer right to where it says the word wire right there. Then when I let go, it parents. So now the circle is parented to the wire, and you can tell it's parented because there's this little tab all the way to the right here. You should see this tab, and it shows you, it's called parent and link, and it shows you what layer is parented to what right here.
Should these two, the wire and the circle be on the same shape layer?
No, yeah, I put them on 2 different layers. So create a new shape. And I'll come around. So once I show this, I'll come around and start helping out. So everyone just be sure to pay attention to this part. If you want to unparent something, so let's just say you parented this and you're like, oh, that's not what I want. You need to find this tab right here. And if you're not seeing that tab, you should be able to find it by clicking on this one of these buttons right here, but it should be showing up for you no matter what over here. So this tab all the way to the right on your layer, and then you just click and hold it, and then you go to none, and then now it's not parented to anything at all. So again, I'm going to parent my circle to my wire, and so I'm just going to click and hold on the spiral and then drag it down to the object I want to parent it to, and you can see it indicates what layer is parented to right there. If you want to unparent it, you just go click on here and you go to none right there, and then that'll unparent it. And so right now, if I animate my wires unparented, so it looks like this when I animate it. And in order to, now I'm going to parent it. So I click on the spiral and drag it down to the wire layer and then let go. And you can tell it's parented because it shows right there. And now when I rotate the wire, the circle is attached to it right there. And so, oops. Okay, so everyone try to kind of get your projects into this kind of point where we have 2 shape layers right here, a wire and then a circle. They're in the center of your screen. And so remember, we have the align tools for that. Make sure that the anchor point's in the right place. So the anchor point for the wire is right here. The anchor point for the circle is right in the middle of the circle. And then finally, have the circle parented to the wire, because we're going to animate the wire and we want the circle to follow along with it. And then finally, I have my background layer, and you can tell it's locked right here because when I click it, it kind of it strobes black and white and lets go, meaning that it's locked and I can't select it anymore. And again, locking a layer is right here. So everyone give that a shot, and then I'll come around and help out here. All right, everyone. So picking things back up. Next up, I want to animate this thing. So on mine, I have my composition set to be 5 seconds long. That's kind of the minimum requirement for the assignment. So 5 to 10 seconds is what you want to do here. And so if your composition is currently shorter than that, or like 30 seconds or longer than that, remember, you can just click on this composition area right here, go up to composition at the top, and then composition settings. And all the way at the bottom right here, under this composition setting pop-up window right here, we have duration, and you can set it to whatever duration you want right there. And I have it set to 5 seconds right there based on 24, meaning 24 frames per second. So I have it at 24 frames per second, 5 seconds long. And what I'm going to do here is, so remember, I'm not animating the circle. I'm only animating the wire, at least in this kind of simplified animation right here. And so for the wire, you'll just click on this little arrow and go under this transform menu right here. So we have anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. And so we're rotating this pendulum to animate it right here. And basically what I want to do is I'm going to create 2 keyframes, and I'm going to copy and paste it essentially. So for the first, I'm going to put my timeline at 0 seconds in, and then I'm going to rotate it to the left. Let's say 60 degrees looks pretty good to me right there. So I just dragged it till it's 60, or you can just click right where my cursor is and type in 60 right there and press enter. And so that'll be at 60 degrees rotation right there. And remember, to generate your first keyframe, you press the stopwatch directly to the left right there. So you just click on that. And for anyone who's kind of experimented with creating keyframes before this, remember, just kind of drag and select and delete them all before you start this, so that you start with a clean slate right here. Because if there's any keyframe that's kind of wandering around over here, it'll affect the rest of your animation. So anyway, I'm at 0. and I created my first keyframe by just clicking on the stopwatch and setting it to 60 degrees. Then I'm gonna do this so that my timing stays even. I am, let's say, I'll do it for this experiment. I'll do it 1 second each right here, and I'll start there. So I'm gonna go 1 second in, and you can see right here, it should say 1 second right there when you drag your cursor to 1 second in. And then I'm gonna rotate this the opposite direction. So it's at plus 60 degrees now. And so if I type in minus 60 degrees, it's gonna go negative 60 degrees right there, and it'll be exactly even. And so whatever number you click in here, just make sure it's the same number, positive and negative each way, so that your pendulum's not, so to make sure that your pendulum's not going up like 25 degrees one side and then going up, 60 degrees the other direction right there. So for me, I have it plus 60, minus 60 right there. And so I have my two keyframes generated right there. And with a pendulum, this is kind of constant velocity kind of item here. So what I can do here now is I can just drag and select. So I'm just, with my cursor, if you look at what my cursor is doing, I'm dragging and selecting both keyframes like that so that they're both selected right there, and they should both be highlighted blue. And then you can press Command and C, as in cat, for copying it, or you can go to Edit and then copy right here. So Edit, Copy, or Command C. So I'm going to copy these two keyframes, and then I'm going to paste them over here, so that you can just kind of copy and paste and kind of save yourself a lot of time and headache here. So I selected both of these keyframes, press Command and C, or Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to drag my cursor or my time over here to 2 seconds now. And then I'm going to press Command and V as in vampire here, or Edit, Paste right there. So Command V, and it pastes those two keyframes over right there. And then I'll do it one more time. So I'll just go over here to, what am I? This is 4 seconds in, and I'll press Command V one more time. And so now I have very quickly generated the linear keyframes right here. So this might be a little slow. That's okay. But you can see that's kind of my animation right there. And it's moving at a constant velocity right here, which is not necessarily what I want. So I might want to go into the graph editor here. Honestly, something I'm going to do here, just I'm kind of making an on-the-fly adjustment, is I'm just going to go ahead and make this 10 seconds long, because we saw how quickly we made those keyframes. This is not going to add that much time, and it'll just kind of give you some more room to maneuver. So I'm just going to go to composition settings right here. So go up to the top composition settings. And then instead of 5 seconds, I'm just going to make this 10 seconds right here. So I'm just going to delete 10 right here. So it's not going to be a 10-second long composition. You can see that all my layers aren't long enough right now. So what I might need to do is I'll need to unlock my background layer just by pressing the little lock button that's right next to it right there. I'm going to select all my layers right here. If it'll let me, just by holding Shift and clicking them all. So hold Shift and select all your layers, and then I'm just going to drag them all the way to the right, and then hold Shift and it'll snap to the edge right there at the very end. So if you just hold Shift and drag it, it'll go to the end right there. So now we have a 10-second long composition. And so I'm just going to extend this some more right here. So I have it going up to 5 seconds right here. And so I'll just select my first two keyframes again, and I'll press Command C to copy. And I'll go over to 6 seconds in right here, and you can see it's at 6 seconds right there. Command V. Go over to 8 seconds, Command V. And I'll go to 10 seconds and Command V just to get that last keyframe in there right there. So now I have very rapidly created 10 seconds of animation where it's just kind of going back and forth right there. So I initially had 5 seconds, but I feel like 10 seconds will give you a little more room to maneuver and stuff like that if you need more handle. So just to show this one more time here before I go on to the graph editor here. So I'm just gonna, just so you can see the whole process again, I'm just deleting it from the beginning, and I'm bringing this back to where it was when I first started this. Oh, whoops. Give me 1 sec. All right, so showing this one more time, I have a blank composition that's going to be 10 seconds long right here. And so we're 10 seconds long. So I'm at the first frame right here, onto rotation. I drag this down to about 60 right here. So you can type in 60. Creating the stopwatch directly to the left of where it says rotation to create my first keyframe. I'm going 1 second in right here, and it'll say 1 second right there. And it's helpful to be exact on this because I want these evenly spaced. So just be sure just to drag it, bring your cursor all the way to 1 second in here. And I'm going to create the opposite keyframe. So if I did 60 here, I'll do negative 60 on the other side. If I did 50 over here, I'll do negative 50 on the other side. So I'm just going to type in minus 60 right there. So I have keyframe 1, keyframe 2. I'm going to drag and select both of them right here. So I have both keyframes selected, and I'll press Command C to copy, or go to Edit, Copy right there. And I'll go to 2 seconds in, Command V to paste, or you can go Edit, Paste right there. And so I did 1 paste right there. I'll go to my next paste at 4 seconds in, and I always make sure that it says 4, it's an even number over here. Command V, Command V, Command V, and then one more for the last frame right there. And so now I have an animation that kind of brings us up to where we are, where we have a relatively slow animation right here, but it's in its constant velocity. But we're going to fix the velocity issue here next up. So does everyone have that on their screen right now with it's kind of copied and pasted and ready to move on to the graph editor? Okay, so to change the graph editor, I'm going to do this a little different than I did the last one. One side note here is if you haven't already, just be sure to save your project. So just go to File, Save As right here. So File, Save As, and just save your project into your directory, right? So I've been working on my desktop, and then my project directory has been called AE Demo 1. That's what I called it. Then I have my folder called AEPs. And this is where I'm going to save my After Effects projects. So if you save it there, if your computer crashes or something, you won't lose any work here. So so now what I need to do is I need to create some ease in and ease out to give this movement a little bit of naturalism here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all my keyframes right here. So start on the left and drag to the right, or you can go from right to left. So left to right or right to left. And I'm just dragging and selecting all my rotation keyframes that I created right there, just like that. So they're all selected, and you can tell they're selected because normally they're just gray diamonds, but if they're selected, they'll have a blue outline around them right there. So if they have a blue outline, that means they're selected. And I'll go up to this button right here. So this button right here is the graph editor. And so if you click on that, we will get our graph editor here. And you can see right now that there's, if yours looks anything like this, you can see I have a lot of parameters, and this can be a little overwhelming, but you can see I have scale, rotation, and opacity all selected right there. So if you have too many things going on right here, you can just simplify it just by clicking right here, and then it'll just be rotation. And what I'm going to do here, let me just see this. So I'm in the value graph right now. Remember, there's a value graph and the speed graph right here. And I think for this, I'm actually going to want the value graph. I should have tested this out, but it's this button right here. You click on it, and then you go to Edit Value Graph. And what I'm going to do is I showed you last class. I showed you the ease in, and then the ease out. And what I have right here is this button right here, which is Easy Ease, which eases in and eases out, right? Because we're going back and forth here. And so we want our keyframes to ease in and ease out on each side. So I just have all my rotation keyframes selected. I moved it to the value graph, and then I'm just going to press this button right here. And you can see right there, it creates a nice little graph editor right here. And keep it all selected right there. So don't click into this box. All you need to do, just to kind of take us a step back right here, is I selected all my keyframes like this, like that. Then I press this button right here in the graph editor. I'll just make sure rotation's selected right here. Maybe if I click off of it, oh, I messed that up. Let's see here. My bad. Let's see here. So select all your keyframes, go to the graph editor. And I think, yeah, this is going to be better in the edit value graph right here. And then I'm just going to press the easy ease button, which eases in and eases out of each keyframe right here. So I click on that, and you can see it turns it into from a linear shape, which it was right here, into a shape with an ease in and an ease out on each keyframe. Then I'll just play it, and this looks better, right? That's pretty good. But I might want to add a little more ease in and ease out on these. Something that's nice here, since these are all selected and these are all easies, all I need to do is just grab this handle once, drag to the left, grab this handle once, drag it to the right, and it's going to it's going to do it across the board here. So look at the screen right here. I'm going to click on just any of these left Beziers right here, and I'm just going to click, hold shift, and drag it. You can see it's changing the velocity right there. And then so you can press edit undo. Shoot. And if you click off of it, you might just need to press edit undo. So again, I'm just clicking right on that Bezier, holding shift and dragging it over. Now I'm going to click the right Bezier, hold shift, drag it over. And I'm just being careful to use my eye here on this. And so now it's got a little more easy. You see, it's got a little more weight to it now. You can see it's slowing down a lot more on either edge right here. And it's just because I grabbed the left handle, dragged it over a little bit, grabbed the right handle, dragged it over a little bit. And you can see right here, these areas towards the keyframes where the line, the graph is moving more horizontal, it's slowing down. And then as it gets more vertical, it's moving quicker right here. So I can just continue to adjust this right here. If I want it to be even more exaggerated, I just click that. And you just want the Beziers to be even on either side. And for this, I find it best just to kind of use your eyes on this a little bit. You could use this, you see this grid that's superimposed in the background. You could hypothetically just drag that to the grid, and then drag this handle to the grid, and then they'll be perfectly even right there. So we have just a little bit of ease in, ease out on your animations right here. And so one thing about navigating the graph editor in After Effects is it's kind of got a mind of its own, and it can be pretty frustrating to get used to, but there's kind of like tricks like this that you can do to save yourself a ton of work, you know, and end up with a much more pleasing animation than if I were to kind of try to do this one by one. Because with the pendulum, this animation is supposed to stay the same as you go throughout here. So I'm just going to press edit and undo a bunch of times just to kind of get us back to our starting point. And go to the graph editor. So just to show this one more time, so I have my keyframes generated here. So we have our linear animation to start with right here. So it looks like this to begin with. That looks pretty bad. Linear animation is usually pretty hard to look at. And so you just drag and select all your keyframes right there. Go up to your graph editor right here. You can see that all my keyframes are still selected in my graph editor. And make sure that you click on this button right here. Go to value graph right there. And then you press the easy ease button, which is going to give us an ease in and an ease out on each keyframe rather than just one or the other right there, which is what we did last class. So you click on that. And then without deselecting anything, so I don't click my cursor anywhere in here, I just go straight to these two handles right here. And so I'm just going to hold shift on my keyboard and click right on this handle, drag it over a little bit to create a little ease in, and then click here and drag a little bit to add a little ease out on that keyframe right there. And you can see since all the keyframes are selected, it's going to do whatever action you do here to all your keyframes right here. So if you want, like, I'm going to do a real exaggerated one right here. So just so you can see, this is going to be a pretty exaggerated one where, so if you want it to be like a little more, you know, like cartoony right here, you'll have a little more ease in, ease out right there. And all I did was just dragged my handles over here, both left and right. If you want it to be a little less exaggerated, you just click and drag that in a little bit, and you just want them to be, you want it to be symmetrical. That's the main thing. You don't want it to be like this where you have like an animation like this is going to be weird. I'll just exaggerate this just a little bit further. So if you have an animation like this where it's not even on both sides of the keyframe, it's going to just be, it's going to be a little weird, you know, like that can be useful for some kinds of animation, but for a pendulum, you want it to be even right here. So whatever you kind of choose for your ease in and ease out, just try to make it even on either side right here. So for mine, I might have it something like that. And we have ease in, ease out created for 10 seconds of keyframes. And you know, if I wasn't sitting here explaining it, I could have done it in, you know, like 10 seconds, you know, it's just kind of knowing some of these techniques can kind of help kind of these go a little faster here. So to get out of the graph editor, I just press this button right here and I go back to my normal keyframes. You can tell an ease by the keyframe will have this look to it right here where it's kind of got like a column shape to it a little bit. And so that means that there's a keyframe on either side, or sorry, an ease on either side of it right there. Whereas if there's no ease in or ease out, it's going to just be a diamond shape right there. So these keyframes kind of change their shape depending on what you've done with them in the graph editor right there. And you can see at this point, we now have most of what we need for our animation. There's still details and things like that I want to add, you know, because so now we're kind of getting more into the creative side of things, but this kind of gives us at least the foundation for the animation here. So everyone give that a try. Remember, in the graph editor, you want this to be pretty even here from left to right. And give this a shot, and just let me know if you have any questions here. All right, everybody. So another tip here that I forgot to say is so you can select all these keyframes by dragging and selecting like this to kind of get all the keyframes, which is what I was doing. But one thing I forgot about is you can just click on the word where it says rotation. So if you click on the word, it selects all your keyframes right there automatically. If this is framing up weird, we try pressing, I mean, this is framing up correctly for me, so it's not going to do anything, but there's this kind of like double waveform, this fit all graphs to view right here. So this button right here can be helpful for framing things up if your graph editor is kind of framing up your keyframes in a strange way. So this button right there might be useful for you right there. And so right now, we should have a animation that has some ease on either direction right here. And so this is kind of like the foundation for the animation right here. And I'm trying to think of what would be like a fun next thing to show right here. So
we make the circles change colors when it goes to one side and the other side.
Yes, we can do that. Let me put that into next class though, just so we kind of I don't want to jump ahead here. So so yeah, I'll put that on the agenda for next class here. So next up, what I want to kind of begin to show you all is, so we had when we're creating these new shapes right here. So I created a solid back here for the background, and I should relock that just so I can't select it. And then I created two shape layers right there. And so in terms of other things that you can create in After Effects, remember, we don't really need this for this assignment, but you can go to Layer, New, and this is where you create kind of new things right here. But we can also create like lights and cameras. So this will be helpful when we start incorporating 3D elements into things right here, as lights and cameras right there. We can create text. So for instance, I could create a piece of text, and I'm just going to write some gobbledygook right there. And so right here, a text layer, if you create it, works the exact same as a shape layer where you can kind of put it in, place it. I'm not going to go too far into the characters here for this assignment because we don't really need it for this assignment. But when you're using the type layer, if you need to retype something, you can just double click it right here, and everything will highlight red right there. So you can retype right there. And when you have the type control right here, it shows up and it behaves very similar to a shape layer right here. So we can expand it out and we get a lot of these same controls right here. There's this text set of controls right here, which can be fun to experiment, and we might dive down into that down the road. To change your font and things like that, you just look for the character panel over here, and you can select whatever font is currently loaded onto your computer right here. So I could give it some kind of weird font right here, so we can change the font types right here. So you can see previews of each different font type right here as we're scrolling through. And so let's just, I'm gonna try to choose one that isn't completely awful. Yeah. All right, here we go. And when you're dealing with fonts, it's the way that this thing works, just generally speaking, is you change the color right here by double clicking on that box right there. And you can change the color of your font right there. You can give it a stroke, like an outline stroke with this box right here. So this is pretty similar to Photoshop right here. It has no stroke at the beginning, and you can tell because it has that white box with the red line through it right there. And you just click back and forth between the main color and the stroke right here. You change the size of the font right here. And these are kerning controls where you can change the spacing of the font right here. And we'll kind of go into this more down the road this semester, but it's I'm not going to go too much into detail again on this. And then we have some options down here. So this is all kerning right here, which is the spacing between letters. And so here I can make it bold, I can make it italic, I can make it all caps right here, I can make it first case larger, and then right there. And so you can kind of change the basic controls all through here. And one thing that's helpful about the fonts too is you can see we have the anchor point right there. If I want to change the anchor point, it's the same as a shape layer. So I can press Y to get to the anchor point control. And then if I hold down Command on my keyboard, I can snap it to the middle of the text layer to the bottom right there. And so right now it's now center aligned right here. So now if I go to rotate it, I can rotate it from the middle right there. And with the text, a lot of the time the align button becomes really helpful on the text as well, because especially if you're doing motion graphics and things like that, a lot of the times you're going to want to have your text aligned correctly. So that's where this align panel can be super helpful to kind of get yourself into a good starting place with the text right there. So that's one kind of layer you can create right there. So we did layer, new, and I created a text layer right there. And what I want to show next are effects. And so the effects is you can add kind of visual, you can add visual effects and controls to your animations here by adding effects. And we can do that in one of two ways. I can apply an effect directly onto one of these layers right here, or I can create an adjustment layer right here and add an effect to it, and it'll add that effect, whatever effect you add onto the adjustment layer will be applied to all the layers that fall underneath it right there. And so let's just kind of go into some of these effects right here. So one kind of good basic effect to show right here to kind of get started is I'll select my wire right here. And if you go, you have to select whichever layer that you want to apply the effect to. And I will show you the adjustment layer in a moment. Right now, I'm just going to apply the effects directly onto the layers themselves. And so right here, I'm going to go to, I'm going to select the wire shape layer, and then I'm going to go up to effect. And you can see I have all these options down here, and there's a ton of things that I can do to this, and it just depends on what you want to do right here. So to kind of start off, I could go down to, like, you could do color correction, and you can see we have just a ton of effects right here where I can do things like levels, which is like a brightness and contrast style control, or we can just go straight to brightness and contrast to change the colors. You can go to hue saturation right here, for instance. Let's show hue saturation here for a second. So I go to hue saturation right there. So I just selected the wire and I went to effects, down to color correction, and then down to hue saturation right there. And so, and that was with the wire shape selected. And then you get this control right here. And what this control allows you to do is, if I take this, I have three controls here. So I have the master hue is what it's called. And you can see as I move this wheel, it changes the hue, the color of my shape. As I turn the wheel, it kind of cycles through the rainbow right there. So if you drag that wheel, you can kind of change the color that way. We have this slider right here where if I drag it all the way down, it's going to be it's the saturation levels. And so if I drag it to -100, it'll go to a gray object. If I type in 0 or bring it to 0, it'll be as it was. And then if I drag it to 100, the colors will just get kind of boosted up all the way to full saturation. And then let's see here. So I'll type 0 right there to recenter it. And then finally I have lightness. So if I drag it down, it's going to be black. And then if I drag it up, it'll be white right here. So you can actually do a ton of controls to your animation here with these 3 controls under hue saturation right here. So the hue is a wheel, and you can see as I'm dragging it around clockwise, and it's going all the way to 360 here. And then when I bring it to 360, past 360, it goes to, there's a 1 that shows up here, and then however many extra degrees I have onto it right there. And so you can see I can cycle through the color wheel using this right here. And so there's several ways that you could animate the color, and one of the ways is I could set the hue right here as a keyframe. And then just to kind of show that, so I'll set that at 0, and then I could like set a keyframe and then animate it going through. So before, let's see here. So let's show some other effects here before I get too much into animation and stuff like that. So some other examples of effects you can do is, again, I still have the wire selected right here. So I can go to effects. And another thing I could do is I could go down to perspective and down to drop shadow right here, or you could do radial shadow right here. So effect, perspective, and drop shadow. So this is another effect you can do. And there's a really minimal change that happens at first. If I zoom in on this, you can see that drop shadow initially created right there. So you can see right there, a drop shadow is created that's really minor. And I have some controls right here. So I can have the drop shadow by default, it's set to black at 50% opacity, meaning that this blue background is going to be showing through by 50% through a black layer. And so that's the shadow color. We have the opacity. So if I set it to 100, the shadow is going to be 100% opacity. And then this is the direction that the shadow is moving. You can see it's pointed to the bottom right. And you can see the shadow is moving to the bottom right of the object. To make this a little easier to see, I'm going to increase the distance. So now we can see the distance of the shadow is kind of moving off. So if I want the shadow to appear like it's appearing really far away from the object right here, I just take the distance and move that up. And you can change the direction of it right here. And if you want the shadow to be soft, you can soften it up right here. Or if you want it to kind of have a graphic look, like this, you could set it to have no softness at all to it right here. So with the shadow, I can just like change the softness slider right here to make it softer. I can change the distance right here. I can change the direction right here. So this wheel right here changes the direction of the shadow. Notice that there's a stopwatch next to all of these things. So I could animate anything, any of these parameters right here. I could create keyframes and I could animate them right here. So I have the angle, the distance, the opacity. And again, I can change the color. One thing I could do is I could, for the color, so I just, to change the color of the shadow, I'm just double clicking the black box right here. And I get this eyedropper tool, and I could make it the same hue as the background right here, and then just make it a darker version of it right there. And so that way it'll kind of color match the rest of your scene. Did you see how before my drop shadow looked pretty harsh like that? So if you want like a harsh shadow, you can just leave it black. But if you want it to kind of fade in with your scene a little bit, you can just double click on this black box, pick the eyedropper, choose your background color, and now it's going to be the exact same color as your background, but now all you need to do is just make it like a darker version right there. And you can see we have a blue shadow now that matches the rest of my background, and it kind of, in terms of like color, fits in with it a little bit better. So something else that's fun about effects is I can animate any of these parameters right here with a stopwatch, creating keyframes for any of these. And the keyframes work exactly the same as how I've been doing this in the past with these other parameters. But something else that's nice about effects is these exist as like their own independent like modules here. So what I mean by that is I have the drop shadow here. Let's say that I really like this drop shadow that I applied to the stick, and I really want to apply that to the circle. What I can do is just on the wire right here, I can select the drop shadow right here, and this is under my effects controls. It should be showing up right here. So hopefully it's showing up in that place for you. So you can select it and you press Command C to copy it. And then I can go over to the circle, click into the effects controls panel right here, press Command V. And now I have that same shadow copied and pasted into another layer right there. So you can very quickly kind of reapply your effects to different layers right here without having to kind of recreate it from scratch each time. So you can see that the drop shadow exists, is kind of falling onto the circle, onto the wire, and then the wire is going onto the background right there. If you want it so that the drop shadow is not affecting the stick right here. So do you see that, how the drop shadow is falling off of the circle and hitting the stick right there? So right now it looks like it's kind of existing on 3 separate planes. If you wanted to look like it's all on one plane, what we would have to do is pre-compose this animation right here. And that's something I'll show you all later, but that's going to get a little complicated. So I'm gonna hold off on that for right now. So that's drop shadow right there. So that's a really helpful one that can be helpful in a lot of instances here. Another effect that I like a lot is, let's say with the circle, I want it to have like a little bit of a glow or something like that, is I can go to, so I select the circle, go to effects, go down to stylize and glow right here. And so effect, stylize and glow. And I can add an effect right here. And I'm going to need to change some controls on this right here. So you can see a lot of controls come up, but if you take the radius of the glow and then you boost that up, it's going to kind of add like a little bit of a glow situation to it right there. You can see, so one thing that's important to know about the glow is it's generally going to work best on bright objects in front of darker backgrounds. So if you have like a bright object with a darker background, it'll look better than if it's like a midtone in front of another midtone or something like that. So let's take this glow. So I'll just delete that. And let's try applying it to the wire here. It might look a little better there. So if I go to effect, and notice when I go up to effect, that the most recent effect that I use will always show up right there. So if you just use glow and you like navigated through the menu right here, so effect, stylize, and then you find glow, and you apply the effect. The next time you open effect, it's going to show up as the first thing right here. So I just go glow, and the radius is usually the first thing I try to control right here. And you can kind of begin to kind of mess around with the glow effect right here. Yeah, that's generally the way the effects work, is you just kind of got to familiarize yourself with all the effects that are available right here. You can also, if you go to the tab or the panel over here that's called effects and presets. Oops, I'm getting the wheel. With effects and presets, so this panel right here that says effects and presets is the exact same as this effects right here. But one thing that's nice about this is you have this little search bar. So if you know you want to do a glow and you just don't know where to look, you can see right here, I typed in glow and I get all the options of effects that have the word glow in them. So if you're thinking like, I want to add some kind of graininess or something to like my animation, you can like type in grain and kind of see what options are in there. So you can kind of search for different things here. So like contrast. So you can kind of search for different effects in here. So you can apply effects directly to your layers here. And I kind of encourage you to kind of try that out a little bit and experiment with those. But another way you can do effects is, so you can apply it one at a time on these layers right here. Or I could go to what I was saying before, where you go to layer, new, and then you create an adjustment layer right here. And so an adjustment layer, again, is a layer that makes it so if I put an effect on the adjustment layer, it's going to apply whatever effect is on the adjustment layer to anything that falls underneath it right here. So one effect that I like to mess around with a lot is called Posterize Time. And so what I'm going to do to find it is if under effects and presets right here, is I like to just type it in over here. So posterize, and you can see it's under the time and it's right here. So if you want to find it up here, you go to effects. Oops. You would go up to effects, look for time, and then find posterize time right there. And this is that effect I was showing at the beginning of class where you set the perceived frame rate of your animation right here. So right now it's set at 24 frames per second, you know, and it looks like that. So it's a very smooth, kind of like digital looking animation right here, very clean. And if you want it to have more of like a stop motion look, for instance, like you could take posterize time. Let's just really exaggerate it. I'm going to bring it down to like 9 frames per second here. And so now when it animates, you can see how it's making it look like you're kind of doing like a stop motion kind of paper cutout animation a little bit here. So 9 is very exaggerated right there. I was just kind of showing, let's take it even lower. So I'll take it down to 3. Oops, that's 13. There we go. So you can see like a really exaggerated version of it right there. And sometimes this can be a good effect just to kind of get this thing looking a little more organic. So if I take it to 18, for instance, 15, let's try 15. You can see that it's just kind of breaking it up a little bit and making it kind of feel like a little more hand-drawn right there. So that's kind of another fun effect right there. But let's say for the adjustment layer right here, that I want to add other effects to this. So the posterized time can be a really fun one in there. But let's say I want to add some more effects to the whole thing. So let's say I go under the adjustment layer, I go to effect, color correction, and then I go back to the hue saturation one that I was showing before. So I go back to hue saturation. Now when I do the color wheel, it's going to affect the entire animation, right? Rather than just the one layer that I have selected right there. So if you want your whole scene affected at the same time, the adjustment layer is the way to go in terms of effects. Does that make sense? So you can either apply an effect directly onto a layer right here, or you can go up to layer, new, adjustment layer, and then you can add effects into the adjustment layer. And as long as it's on top of your other layers, it's going to, whatever effect you do up here is going to affect anything that's underneath it right there. Let's see here. Yeah, and so some of the effects that I showed here, we have hue saturation right here. Posterize time is one that I like a lot. There's also drop shadow right here. And again, there's a huge menu right here that you can choose between. And let's see here. For the rest of the class, I'm going to let you mess around with this. And one other thing I would say before I give y'all some time to work is, and this is more of like a future reference thing, it's not going to be relevant so much to this class, is one thing that helps After Effects become as powerful as it is using plugins, which is third-party developers make plugins for pieces of software. And so you can download and find plugins of like effects that independent creators make for After Effects and load it in. And some of my favorite effects are third-party stuff that you can kind of add in and kind of do some pretty crazy stuff. And I might kind of at least show you that just so you can see some examples of what that is. But that's not going to like come up like as something that you need to do for this class, just kind of for your information right there. So anyway, that kind of brings us to this point.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.